Well, there are three aspects of this bill that are important. The focus was on primarily the third one, and I can go into number one and number two if you wish. But the third one deals with the cost of premiums to Americans. We're supposed to be doing this in order to make health insurance and health care more affordable. Unfortunately, this legislation, this massive Republican welfare plan, does not do that. According to the Congressional Budget Office and the Joint Committee on Taxation, health insurance premiums, if this Republican health care plan passes, will go up 15 to 20% over the next 2 years. And so the intensity of the discussion that we just had was, how are we going to do what needs to be done to lower the cost of premiums, not increase them, because increasing them is the exact opposite direction for a lot of struggling American families who are trying to make ends meet.
Congressman, are you any closer after that meeting to a yes tonight?
No, ma'am, I am not. And if I could have a second, let me explain why. I mentioned there are three things. One is we have to lower the cost of premiums, and this legislation, as it currently exists, does not do that. But second, this is the largest Republican welfare program in the history of the Republican Party, and we're being asked to vote for it.
So,
and ultimately, that undermines the work ethic and increases taxes.
You think they got to throw this whole thing out and start over to get you to
well,
a yes?
Well, this is what I would advocate, and I have advocated. We need to pass the same repeal bill that passed the House and the Senate just 2 years ago, that went to Barack Obama's desk. He vetoed it. Donald Trump would sign it. It needs to have an effective date sometime in the future. Now, this is important to break this action into two: repeal and then whatever you're going to have to improve the system. No Democrat's going to vote for anything that has any semblance of repeal in it, even if it's only a partial repeal. Once you pass the repeal, all of a sudden, all those Democrat votes become active participants in whatever we're going to do to improve health care in the United States of America, hopefully at lower cost to American citizens. So now you have a much bigger block of congressmen and senators that you can work with as you try to cobble together the votes that are necessary to get it through the House of Representatives, which is relatively easy, and then to do the eye of the needle kind of thing with the United States Senate, where they are hamstrung by these arcane rules that, for the life of me, I don't understand why they still agree to.
I want to turn to the Supreme Court. The confirmation hearings you and the Judiciary Committee held this week. The top Democrat in the Senate now, Chuck Schumer, he says that he's going to filibuster, Democrats are, Neil Gorsuch. You said today that you'd do whatever it takes to get him on the court. Does that include the nuclear option, the Washington speak senator for changing the rules to make it easier to force through a nominee?
So here's what I believe. If you filibuster Judge Gorsuch, you're telling President Trump and every other Republican, we don't care that you won. He's the most qualified person President Trump could have chosen, beyond reproach in terms of the qualifications. It would be basically setting aside the election and denying President Trump his ability to appoint a Supreme Court justice, and I will not let that happen.
But answer me this. Will you sign on to the nuclear option for Supreme Court nominees?
I'm telling my Democratic colleagues, if you do not allow up or down vote on this guy, after what I've done in the past, then you don't care about the traditions of the Senate. You don't care about President Trump being treated fairly. I didn't vote for him. I didn't vote for Obama. I hadn't voted for a president who won in 12 years. But the one thing I will not do is allow President Trump to be denied what every other president's had the ability to do, is nominate qualified people. So yes, I'm not going to play the game two different ways. I hope I never have to get there, but I want you to know that I am not going to play the game where they get everything they want and we never get anything. That's not going to happen.
I'll take that as a yes.
Gunned down in broad daylight, Denis Voronenkov, a critic of Vladimir Putin, killed today in Ukraine's capital, Kiev. His horrified wife has to identify his body on the street. Voronenkov was a former Russian lawmaker who fled to Ukraine last year. Ukraine's president says his murder is, quote, an act of Russian state terrorism. A Ukrainian prosecutor calls this an execution of a witness.
When he gets to Ukraine, he begins to give evidence about the Russian connection to former Ukrainian President Yanukovych and possibly the Russian invasion of Crimea and annexation.
In an interview last month, Voronenkov said he wasn't worried for his safety.
I believe that whatever will happen, will happen. I don't intend to hide.
Earlier this week, another man, inconvenient to Vladimir Putin, fell 4 floors from his Moscow apartment and was badly injured. It's not clear tonight if attorney Nikolai Gorokov fell accidentally or was pushed. Russian news outlets say he fell while helping movers carry a hot tub to his apartment.
I think that some foul play was involved.
Bill Browder is a financier who ran the largest hedge fund in Russia. He was the boss of a Russian whistleblower named Sergei Magnitsky. Magnitsky died in Russian custody in 2009 after uncovering a massive fraud which he and Browder alleged Russian officials committed against their firm. The victim of the fall, Nikolai Gorokov, had represented Magnitsky.
He was going to show up in Moscow court with a bunch of new evidence, which consisted of emails and WhatsApp messages showing that Russian organized criminals were communicating directly with the Russian police to try to cover up the murder of Sergei Magnitsky and cover up the corruption crime that Sergei had exposed.
The Russian Federation.
And yet another Putin critic who's had some bad luck in recent weeks. Vladimir Kara-Murza was in a coma last month, then came out of it. The second time in 2 years he'd fallen into a coma after a suspected poisoning. Kara-Murza is an activist who's called for more open elections in Russia.
I think what's not coincidental is that all of these folks are swimming in very dangerous shark-infested waters. The message is out. If you are going to oppose very powerful interests in and around Russia, you're going to get hurt or you may get killed.
In 2015, prominent Putin critic Boris Nemtsov was shot in the back just steps away from the Kremlin. How does Putin escape blame?
It could be a nod of, get him, and then there are layers and layers and layers, and there's no specific order or a time or any kind of crushing evidence that links him.
This is Denis Voronenkov, who, as you said, fled to Ukraine from Russia and really is highly critical, not just of the Kremlin, but generally of Russian foreign policy, especially towards Ukraine and the annexation of Crimea. Now, from what we've been able to piece together from the Ukrainian authorities and the things that they've been saying, is they say that this happened in the morning hours of today at the Premier Palace Hotel, which is right in the center of Kiev. And it seems as though Denis Voronenkov and his bodyguard were coming to that hotel, and a gunman was waiting for them there. The gunman then apparently opened fire, fatally wounding Denis Voronenkov and also wounding the bodyguard as well. However, the bodyguard was able to fire back, and he hit the assailant several times. The assailant then was severely wounded as well. Obviously, authorities, police were on the scene fairly quickly. Denis Voronenkov died at the scene. His bodyguard is wounded. And the assailant then, we've just learned a couple of minutes ago, died in hospital. And from what we're hearing, he never regained consciousness. Now, of course, all of this leading to major reactions both in Kiev and here in Moscow, with even the president of Ukraine, Poroshenko, going out and blaming this on the Russians. The Russians, for their part, are calling these claims absurd and saying that the Ukrainians were unable to provide for this man's security. Robin?
So we know Voronenkov was a whistleblower. What did he reveal, and who would want him dead then?
Well, I mean, certainly he did fear that the Russians might be after him. One of the things about Denis Voronenkov is that he was in the Communist Party here in Russia. He even authored a bill that severely curbed press freedom here in Russia. But then apparently he grew sour with politics here in this country. He then fled to Ukraine. He took on Ukrainian citizenship, and he was highly critical of Russia's actions in Ukraine, and especially about Crimea. He said that there was a poisoned atmosphere here in Moscow after the annexation of Crimea. And apparently he was supposed to testify before the Armed Services Committee of Ukraine earlier or later today, and presumably give information about that. But he was certainly someone who feared for his life, and certainly said that he believed that Russia was after him.
Times cover, Is Truth Dead?, pays homage to a 1966 big question cover, Is God Dead? But you know what isn't dead? Donald Trump's ego. As we saw when he met with trucking CEOs, the president isn't shy about blowing his own or anybody else's horn. Consider how he ended the Time magazine interview on the question of his credibility. I can't be doing so badly
because I'm president and you're not.
I'm president. You're not.
I'm president and you are not.
The quote ignited internet mockery. I'm a narcissist and you're not. I'm rubber and you're glue. Some thought President Trump sounded positively Pee Wee Herman-esque.
You're an idiot.
I know you are, but what am I?
I know you are, but what am I? I know you are, but what am I?
But the president's supporters like a man who knows what he is. Alpha male president, commented one. Trump, this is why we love you. I'm president and you're not. Does that remind you of anyone?
Good evening, I'm Chevy Chase, and you're not.
Good evening, I'm Chevy Chase.
One critic reacted to the Time interview by tweeting, days without embarrassing the U.S., 0. But others brought up Barack Obama's presidential pronouncement on a Jimmy Kimmel Mean Tweets segment. Back when it looked like Trump would lose, the then candidate tweeted, President Obama will go down as perhaps the worst president in the history of the United States.
Well, at real Donald Trump, at least I will go down as a president.
Well, we all know who got the last laugh. Actress Sally Field captioned this photo, eastbound and demented, but he's the trucker-in-chief and we're not. Jeannie Mo, CNN.
If I have a bell, would they be happy?
New York.